Hi, I'm Chris Bournet, and I hope you enjoy this conversation between myself and film critics and podcasters John Orlando and Paul Markoff about what are the most important ingredients that lead to success in filmmaking. This is one in a series of conversations that I will have with filmmakers, film critics, and movie buffs about all aspects of the movies and filmmaking. I hope you enjoy and let me know what you think about it. All right, I'm Chris Bournet, writer and filmmaker. We're here with John Orlando and Paul Markoff. Guys, why don't you introduce yourselves?
Well, I'm John Orlando. I run the PBD Cast podcast, which is my own independently produced podcast here in Columbus, Ohio. That's where we met.
Yep.
I had you on as a guest a few years ago, I believe. It's hard to believe a few years ago.
Yeah, I know.
I think it was the fall of 2018.
Yeah.
So, but anyways, I like to interview individuals that are involved in some of my passions, such as movies, professional wrestling, hockey, and of course pro wrestling. So, and I'll throw it over to you, Paul.
I'm Paul Markoff, co-host and co-producer of Filmbound. It's a podcast that I co-host and co-produce with Mark Piper, who I previously co-hosted and co-produced a film review program on the Westerville Otterbein Community Channel for 20 years.
Cool. So the topic of this discussion is desire, expertise, resources, or circumstances, in you guys' opinion, are one of those factors more important in making a good movie? And I'll tell you how I came across or came up with this topic is that every year I put together a list of movies to watch, great movies to study, like Citizen Kane, and also like more recent movies and movies that are a little bit more diverse, like Spike Lee. I just watched The Black Klansman, and so the past few years watching all different kinds of movies, it just kind of occurred to me that there are a lot of big budget Hollywood movies with big stars, that have the best cinematographers, the best behind the scenes people, but they end up making crappy movies. And then there are smaller independent movies, that are, maybe they don't get as widely seen, but they're just a lot better. And you would think that's an impossibility. How can someone with, every resource at their fingertip make a bad movie, and somebody who's like putting something together with spit and bubble gum, how can they possibly make something worth watching? But it just seems to be happen over and over. So I'll just kind of throw it out there. So do you guys think desire or expertise, do you think those two things, do you think either one of those are more important in making a good movie, just from the movies you've seen and your life experience?
Well, I think, to start things off, I think this is a very complex topic, to be very honest, for the folks that are watching this or listening to this. I don't think that the time that we spend here discussing this really will do justice to the actual problem, because there's all different types of things that go on when you make a film. But from my perspective, I think desire is probably the most important aspect when making a movie. I guess maybe this might not be a very good analogy, but I look at it as like a gas tank in your car. Expertise is gasoline. You can always put more into the tank. But if you don't have the tank to begin with, then you're not going anywhere. Your car's stuck. And so I think desire has to be there, and then you can always add more expertise.
Yeah, I would concur. If you don't have the desire, you're not going to make something of any value.
Right.
Expertise can be acquired over a period of time, or again, if you find the resources available to go to film school or to educate yourself in the ways.
Right.
But if you don't have the desire to create something that you're proud of or that you are passionate about, your project's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah. And just speaking from my own experience, like I didn't go to film school. I mean, I've always wanted to be a writer and filmmaker. But now with the internet, it's just so easy to, educate yourself about filmmaking and just practice making short films. So the one film that I have under my belt is a documentary called Lady Wrestler about famous black women wrestlers from the 1950s. And I mean, I was just so naive. I was like, I'll just go out and buy a used, prosumer camera and figure it out as I go along and interview these women. And, looking at, you can never be totally objective about your own work. But I know, my documentary is not the most technically sophisticated. It doesn't look, as slick as something you'd see on Netflix or whatever, but it's generated a lot of interest simply because of the subject matter. So sort of like the saying, sometimes it's better to be interesting than good. I've seen that play out. And there's plenty of film school grads who they have a ton of expertise and they maybe even have the desire, but they can't seem to get a movie made because they've been schooled literally in that way of thinking that you have to either go through a studio, you have to like work your way up from, a production assistant and take years and years and years until you get to one of the top crew positions. Or if you're going to work in the independent arena, that you have to only work on projects that are like, 100,000 and above, where it's basically like a studio movie. It's just not done by a major studio. And it seems like that keeps a lot of, people who want to make movies. It takes them years and years and years, and sometimes they never make a movie because it's like they're waiting for the perfect circumstances to line up.
Oh yeah, and I totally agree with you on that, Chris. I think that personally, myself, I'm interested in making a film as well. I wrote one. I've never done much with it because.
Do you want to say what it's about?
Well, it's about kind of pokes fun at the local politics of my hometown of Steubenville, Ohio.
Okay.
And I did a little bit with it in 2006. Unfortunately, it didn't turn out the way I wanted it, and so I still had that desire to make it, but sometimes life gets in the way. I mean, you are not independently wealthy.
No.
I am not independently wealthy. Paul, you're not independently wealthy. So we all have to have day jobs. We all have to have bills to pay.
Yeah.
And with jobs comes other responsibilities. That desire has not disappeared.
Right.
So maybe it's going to take me more time than I wanted it to, or what other people think it should take. But I feel like if you still have that desire, you'll do something with it. You'll have something eventually that you can be proud of, and you can say, I did this.
Yeah. Well, and Chris, to your point earlier, that you had a passion to tell this story.
Yeah.
And now, in today's day and age, and you wouldn't be able to do this 20, 25, 30 years ago.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
You have an iPhone. You have any type of phone, but
Yeah.
I would say even more so an iPhone. You're seeing professional filmmakers like Steven Soderbergh.
Yeah.
Or I think Spike Lee's also used.
Sean Baker, the guy that did Tangerine, yeah.
Right, they're shooting these on phones. So the resources are now, available for those that have a passion and that, maybe aren't on the same skill level of a Steven Soderbergh or a Spike Lee.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I also throw it out there too. I think when you come to expertise, there's two different ways of getting expertise. You can go and get formal, proper training.
Yeah.
Or you can just get on the job training, so to speak. And I think for those folks that have that passion, that have that desire, pursue one of those.
Yeah.
And here's a great example. Being in Columbus, Ohio, we have a lot of different resources available to us.
Mm-hmm.
I took several workshops at a local, art. What's it called now? You're gonna have to.
Was it the
Worthington?
What's it?
Art Center.
Okay.
Worthington Art Center. Sorry. Worthington Art Center. They offered some classes, some weekend classes on filmmaking. So you found that, and it was relatively inexpensive. And we have CCAD here in town that offers, workshops. And you have, my goodness, how many universities here in town? Besides just the Ohio State University.
Yeah. It just now has a film major after not having one for several years or decades, probably.
Right. But I think you have the option, if you're not in Columbus, Ohio, just seek out some opportunities. To either get that formal training or to volunteer on a set, and learn and do it. And go from there.
Yeah. So I actually filmed another micro-budget independent movie over the summer called Things Are Tough All Over, about a black family struggling through the Great Recession of 2008. And the model I followed was Edward Burns. Mm-hmm. The Brothers McMullen, his first movie. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you all know the. Yeah. So for those who aren't familiar with it, so Edward Burns was this struggling production assistant for Entertainment Tonight in New York, and he just reverse engineered what he needed to make a movie. He used his parents' house. He got local actors. I think he didn't pay him. I'm pretty sure he didn't pay him because I think the movie he made it for a total of like $25,000, including editing and everything, film stock and everything. And so working at Entertainment Tonight, he had access to the celebrities that they interviewed, and so this was a typical Cinderella story. He approached Robert Redford on an elevator after he had just gotten through doing an interview, and actually slipped him his VHS tape and was like, I just made this little independent movie, would you consider watching it. And amazingly, Robert Redford actually had someone at Sundance watch it, and the brothers McMullen became the toast of Sundance, and he got like a 3-picture deal, and all for making a little movie, you know, in his parents' house.
And then that sprung to him being in some other movies too.
Yeah,
I mean, he was in Saving Private Ryan and a ton of other films.
Yeah.
And you know, that's funny you mentioned that, because my example that I have, that I wrote down, when you talk about obstacles, Chris, when you talk about the idea of having funding, is 2002's Narc, which is a favorite movie of mine if you've not seen it.
Who's anyone?
Jason Patrick and Ray Liotta. Busta Rhymes is also in it.
Okay.
It's pretty much a standard drug enforcement cop looking to try to find answers about a murder. It's very well done, but as the story goes, you know, they got halfway through the production and Jason Patrick ran out of money, and you know.
Oh, Jason Patrick directed it.
He was if I'm not mistaken, I believe he is the director. Yes, and ran out of money, but managed to find an audience in Tom Cruise. Actually, he's not the director; he's the producer.
Okay.
Because the director was Joe Carnahan.
Okay.
And they ended up finding Tom Cruise gave him some more money to finish out the film, and you know, it too, when they took it on the circuit, did really, really well, and then got picked up for distribution. But there you go. There's another. I mean, I was using that as the highlight of even people in Hollywood run into the problems that independent filmmakers run into.
Yeah, and unfortunately,
Chris doesn't have Tom Cruise to finance.
And actually, I think unfortunately, like the big festivals, Sundance, Toronto, Cannes, the movies that play there now are basically like Hollywood movies. They're just not financed by, like, you know, Paramount, or they might be, you know, independent financiers or independent production companies, but they have stars in them. They have, you know, $20 million budgets, or, you know, probably the minimum is like $5 million. You know, we're not talking about like Clerks would probably never make it into Sundance.
Yeah, I was going to say that to me would be another example. When we were talking about upstart films that made it big, Kevin Smith's Clerks is the one that kind of sticks out to me, that launched the next generation of independent filmmakers. That I don't know that, and it's almost like you have 3 tiers now. The true independent filmmakers, I don't know that we really see the light of day of their films anymore.
On streaming services probably, but I mean, like, not Netflix per se, but I mean, like, anyone can upload anything to Amazon.
Yeah,
or,
but I mean, you have like the big studio
video.
pictures, then you kind of have these smaller studios, like maybe an A24 or whatnot, that is still bringing out, I guess to a certain extent, independent-minded films.
Right.
But they're still, to your point, you still have recognizable stars, you still have a reasonable budget where it's in the tens of millions. That's considered independent now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mentioned Spike Lee earlier. I mean, his first movie, She's Gotta Have It, from, you know, the story, the lore he's weaved about it is that he just made it like on a shoestring budget. He was, NYU film school graduate, and just like scraped together $100,000 by selling, you know, collecting cans or whatever he did. And that, you know, I doubt that a movie like She's Gotta Have It, that's not so visually sophisticated, would even get into a huge festival these days.
I think another part that makes it hard to crack the system, if you will, to get your film shown in, you know, multiple areas across the country, is that there are so many. This is great. This is great, but it's also fundamentally the problem is there's so many people making them films that the market is saturated to a certain extent. So you have
that's a good point. I've never actually thought about that. That's a good point, Paul. Yeah, I never thought about it that way. That there is this glut of film now.
I mean, it's almost like the theatrical version of what social media is now. Where everyone kind of has their following and can get their story out. But it gets all muddled because everyone's kind of collective voices in the same room. You don't really hear anything.
It's like that's the double-edged sword of technology. It's like the barrier to entry is lower. It's like democratized. Anybody can make a movie, like you said, because of, you know, you can take your iPhone and make a movie. But now there's just way more competition, and people's attention is just so fragmented. Like, you can set up your own YouTube channel, but getting people to watch your videos is something else. Or you can upload your movie to Vimeo or Amazon, but actually getting people to buy it, pay to watch it, is, you know, another story.
And then, not to be the negative Nancy in the room here, but you have the one bad indie film.
Yeah.
You know, because I've gone to our local showcases sometimes, and you go, wow, that was really good. Well, that was really good. And then you get that one, you're like, you thought that you should enter that. Okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And all it takes is, especially from a public that is fragmented or very fickle, it takes them to go, oh, no, I don't want to. I saw an indie film once. I don't, you know what I mean? And then it ruins it for everyone else.
Right, yeah.
I think if that's someone's first experience with independent cinema, I think you might get that reaction. But if they have a positive experience, to your point, if they watch maybe one or two, that gives them a more optimistic or better view of independent cinema, maybe they're more likely to give it another shot, because I go and see a lot of the mainstream big Hollywood films, and there are bad ones. You're going to see bad ones there, but people still go back for more. So, hopefully the individual that sees the one bad independent film, hopefully that doesn't stain their view.
You would hope. But that's a possibility. That's a true possibility. Just think of it, if you go to a restaurant and you have a bad meal, you might second guess whether you're going to go back there again.
Right. I think if you have a movie that doesn't have major stars in it, unless it's a documentary, you really, really have to make a good movie. I mean, because people are not going to just watch, even if they're just, skimming through Amazon or Netflix. What tends to grab people, in my opinion, is, they see some star that they're familiar with, they see their name, or the description of the movie has to just jump out at them. But if they turn it on in the first 5 minutes, it looks and sounds like crap, they're just going to click to something else.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And I think when we, or to go back to what we originally started with, this idea of desire, I think desire, again, is the crucial, I'm going to repeat, is the most crucial part of it. I think that it trumps everything in all circumstances. I know we kind of talked off air about, what happens if you have some catastrophe that happens on set. What do you do?
Yeah. Like a natural disaster hits.
And I think that again, if you have the desire, you'll make it work. It made me think, actually, when we talked about that off air, about listening to NPR, and in, I believe it was November or December, they had Marielle Heller, who directed It's a Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood.
Okay.
They had a death on set.
Oh my God.
Like about a month before they wrapped up shooting, they had a death. One of their sound engineers was actually, from the way she described it, they had an apartment building and they were on 2 floors, and they had a floor for staging and then the actual set, and he was up by himself on the patio and he fell from the patio. He had a heart attack and tumbled over top of the railing and plunged and fell and died. And Ms. Heller had talked about, it was really tough to kind of figure out, should we continue? All the cast and crew took a vote. You could go home and nobody's going to be upset. You could go home, but they all stayed because they felt like, we need to finish this. We're almost done. We put so much into this. I think she even mentioned that the gentleman, and I can't remember his name, who passed away, would probably have wanted them. Right. She had worked with him in the past. And so I think, again, you got that desire to do it. I think you'll do it no matter what.
Yeah, and I mean, I had something similar, not anything to that degree, but when I was finishing up editing Lady Wrestler, my documentary, Roddy Piper passed away, and I had interviewed him. It was this really strange experience interviewing him at this horror festival in Indianapolis called Days of the Dead. It's kind of a long, convoluted story, but anyway, he was really cool, and he granted me this really this great interview, just talking about how women are looked down upon in wrestling, and it's not fair because a lot of the women are really talented. But anyway, so he passed away. I think he was only 61. And I was like, okay, do I edit him out? Is that disrespectful to include him in this documentary after he's passed away? And then I decided, okay, rather than having him on screen talking, I'll just show his picture and have some narration saying he passed away, shortly after this interview, or a couple years after I did the interview. So I felt that was an ethical way to honor him and to keep what he said because it was so relevant, but not do it in an exploitative kind of way. And
I think it was very powerful because I've seen your film, and I think that adds weight, because I think even the casual wrestling fan knows Roddy Piper, right? And that gives credence to what what you're saying in your film, the message that you're putting out in your film. And I think that if you had cut that out, I think that would have been a major mistake and a huge hole in the story.
Yeah. Thank you. So. kind of getting back to Spike Lee a little bit. So when he made his first movie, it's like he had the desire and the expertise, having gone to film school. So he kind of knew, okay, I'll use black and white film stock that's cheaper. And I'm sure having gone to film school, he knew, about crew that he could hire for cheap or not at all, and just say, I'll pay you, if we make a sale, if the movie sells. He knew how to find actors. So that's a sort of a best case scenario where you have the desire and the expertise. Do you think that's like that is the ideal scenario, or like you were saying, John, it's like even if you don't have the expertise, that desires, because like another example, John Waters, he didn't have expertise. And he just prided himself on making trashy movies for shock value. But I mean, now there's no one more establishment than John Waters. I mean, he just spoke at the Wexner Center like a year ago, and he's a wealthy author and veteran filmmaker now. But he started out making these trashy movies and
with an odd ensemble.
Yeah,
I mean, they were always odd tales too.
Yeah.
Well, to your point earlier, you said it's better to make something interesting than good.
Yeah.
He would be a tribute to that statement.
Yeah.
He wanted to engage his viewers.
Yeah.
And he went for the shock value first and foremost, and then of course that led him to do more mainstream projects like Hairspray and Pecker, and I'm trying to think what more of his recent fare is.
Right.
But he still has the John Waters flavor in these more established pictures when he became more of a developed filmmaker.
Yeah, Crybaby, I think that was one of the more like established ones.
Right.
Johnny Depp.
Johnny Depp was
he
in
did that.
But even that he had
Serial
Tracy
Mom,
Lord.
Serial Mom as well.
Yeah.
Well, I also think too here real quickly, not because as we were talking here, a lot of times the expertise, I don't know if you don't have a good tale to tell, the expertise doesn't mean anything. And we mentioned it. I personally did not much care for the movie Tangerine. I watched it because it was hype that it was shot on an iPhone. I do like Sean Baker's other work that he had done before, because he was behind the scenes with the Greg the Bunny show from IFC and some of those projects. The story just for me wasn't there. Like, I didn't like the story.
It was sort of one of those plotless indie movies, and there's a lot of those where it's like it's supposed to be character driven to the point where there's like really no plot. It's just a bunch of scenes kind of strung together.
Yeah, and that I didn't dig. No, wow, it was beautiful. In the way it was shot, in the way that it was edited, the way that they had an amazing soundtrack.
Yeah, it didn't even look like it was shot.
No, that was great. But again, there you have strong expertise, and they probably had a great desire, but you gotta have an interesting tale to tell, or otherwise I think that you're gonna fall flat.
Right.
Yeah, there's so many ingredients that go into making a successful picture, and we're talking about desire and expertise, and the story that needs to be told. Sometimes it's just the experience. Sometimes it doesn't need a heavy plot. Sometimes the characters are so rich that it's an engaging tale, because regardless of what the characters are involved in, you're sucked in and you're pulled in, and you're hoping that they finish on top. There are other ones where maybe the characters are kind of thin, and even the story is. But it's an overwhelming experience. I saw 1917 recently.
How was that?
There's a film that is very thin on characters.
Okay.
The plot is about as simplistic as you get. Two soldiers trying to get from point A to point B to deliver a message. That's essentially the plot. But it is the most engaging theatrical experience I saw on the big screen last year.
Okay.
It's hard to imagine seeing it in any other format than in the movie theater, where you feel as if you're going along this trek with these soldiers, risking their lives in order to deliver a message that could potentially turn the tides of World War I.
Right.
So I don't know that there's a, quote, magical ingredient in any of what we're talking about. I think it's a collaboration of it all, or maybe it's it's one filmmaker's distinct vision that comes out either in the characters or the atmosphere of the experience or the plot itself. Maybe it's a terrifically written screenplay, or maybe you have them all and you have one of the best films you've ever seen.
Yeah. So John, you use the phrase having a tale to tell. So I have to make a corny pun. That brings us to Cats. So that is a high-profile bomb, obviously. So how do you have Tom Hooper, who I don't know if he was nominated or just the movie King's Speech was nominated for for Academy,
That
Best
was up for
Picture.
Best Picture, yeah.
Okay, how do you have an experienced award, or at least a critically acclaimed director? You have people like Dame Judi Dench, Taylor Swift, big pop stars like Jennifer Hudson and Jason Derulo, and Idris Elba. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yes, I believe.
Okay, and still make a flop. And it's based on this blockbuster musical that was like the longest run, or one of the longest running Broadway shows ever. The music is iconic, at least to people who like that kind of Broadway show tunes. How did they end up sabotaging that? I mean, what do you think went wrong?
I can't speak to it because I haven't seen the film,
Okay,
but based on what I understand,
yeah.
a big part of it was the technological advancements that they thought were going to launch this into being a spectacular film.
Yeah.
Actually made it laughably bad, according to some critics and viewers that were watching it.
Yeah.
Because for lack of a better term, the special effects that were used to make
The fur.
the fur and the form
Yeah.
of the female and male actors
Okay.
was a little too revealing.
Okay.
And they're cats too. So
Yeah,
you
yeah.
have this strange mix of
No
Yeah.
cat is busty, is what you're saying, right? I mean,
right,
Yeah.
right. So
Yeah. And plus, it was like, from the clips I've seen, it was like audiences were totally confused because Broadway is a totally different animal. Excuse the pun, another pun.
Yeah.
From film. So it's like people bought having actors in like spandex bodysuits on Broadway, but when you're doing a movie musical, it's like, okay, they have human hands, but they're supposed to have fur, and then they have human features, like breasts, and then I heard the scaling was off. It's like, okay, they're in somebody's house, and they have a cat sitting at a table, and the like forks and knives look like they're humongous, but then you have the cat back in the alley, and they look like normal size. So, and then they have like a scene with mice where the mice were like as small as a thimble, and it's just like, so I think they only took like 9 months to make the movie. So I mean, obviously you need more time than that for special, because a lot of animated movies, they take years to do the animation. So maybe it was just that they rushed it out, and the stars were like, they didn't have time to commit to like, being there on set for a full year. So they just kind of rushed it out, thinking, well, we have the money to make it look good, but.
I'll just throw this out there again.
Yeah.
I didn't see it.
Yeah, I didn't.
Is it too little, too late? In meaning, would have this been a better project 15 years ago, 20 years ago? Like, has the fervor of cats in Hollywood in Broadway circles? Is it still a thing? Because I don't, you know what I mean?
Well, I think it's like there's this trend of like making, trying to bring the movie musical back. So it's like Les Miserables, that wasn't, hot either, but it's like I forget the director that did that. I think it was the same director who did Cats, I want to say, Tom Hooper. Anyway. So there's this trend of like trying to bring back the movie musical. So I think, so the word was that Cats was unfilmable. Like Steven Spielberg tried to make an animated version of it, and even he couldn't make, excuse me, another pun, heads or tails.
We're full of puns here.
Yeah. But so I think it was just an unfilmable, plotless musical that for some reason worked on stage with the music, like as a live experience, but trying to turn it into like and then again, like what is the audience for it? It's like you have all this,
Right.
from what I've heard, sexual innuendo in it. It's like, aren't you trying to make like a family movie for the holidays where people are going to go take their kids, but yet you have all this, writhing and
And
Yeah.
was it serious? Was it a comedy? Like when I saw the commercials, I'm like, it seems really dark and brooding, but yet other commercials you go, well, it seems a little lighthearted. What's
exactly.
the tone of this
Yeah.
movie?
Yeah.
And I actually thought, Chris, you were going to say something that there was a trend in Hollywood of remaking previous stuff, which I think,
yeah, of course there is.
yeah, there is that, and I think that maybe goes into that desire, because I think that the desire to remake stuff is either we're super big fans of it and we want to do it, or it's cheap and easy and lazy.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's kind of, when you look at remakes that are really successful that people enjoy, I think it's clearly that the desire was, we are big fans, we want to do this right, we're going to, and I can think of like Zack Snyder directing Watchmen, because I think Watchmen was really, really good in the fact that it gave casual fans a glimpse into this universe, but still stuck really, really close to the source material so that the hardcore comic book fans could go, yeah, that was good, that was good. And so I think that, you know, when you take that source of material, make it there, that desire clearly for Zack Snyder was, I'm going to make this good, you know. And then you look at the other side where there's, you know, I mean, not that the original source material for 21 Jump Street, the TV show, was that great, but still, nonetheless, you know,
the nostalgia factor.
The nostalgia factor. The movie, I personally did not much care for the movie. I thought it was just kind of one joke over and over and over again. But
I enjoyed it.
I know you did. I know you did.
I was going to say, and then there's just the varying tastes.
Sure,
one person's bad movie is another person's good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But getting back to the bombs, I think that, you know, when you look at some of the ones that have not done well, I often wonder and question, is it that the director or the actors are spread too thin, that they're not really truly committed, that they're taking a paycheck? Look, I mean, Jaws 4, Michael Caine has been flat out famous for saying, I've never seen the movie, but I've seen the house that the paycheck purchased. You know, I've seen the house that they paid for, and it's a really nice house. So is it some of those times where, you know, you just phone it in and you take the paycheck and you go off to your next project?
Yeah, and I think superhero and comic book movies are so big. One of the movies I was going to mention was the 2015 Fantastic Four, which was a remake of the OO's version with Jessica Alba. And so it seemed like I think the director Josh Trank didn't he like direct a couple of indie movies before that? From what I've heard.
I don't know. I gotta be honest.
But that's another example.
You do have that where there are more independent-minded filmmakers that get their break making a successful independent picture, and then they launch into something that seems like it's completely, out of nowhere that they would direct a Hollywood blockbuster.
Right.
I mean, to a lesser extent, Rian Johnson did that with the Star Wars films. Where he did more independent-minded films, like Looper, and he did Brick, which launched him into Looper, which set him on a course to direct a Star Wars picture.
Yeah, and then returns with Knives Out, most recently too. You know, which again, total deviation from. In fact, I would even say Knives Out is probably one of those step down. You know, you talked about the 3 tiers of filmmaking. Even though it's got an ensemble ensemble cast, and that, I don't know if it had a super huge budget, did it?
I think it was like 20 million.
Was it? Okay, so it was kind of all right. It was kind of what we talked about. It's not truly independent, but you know, still had
kind of like that.
Yeah, it was
kind of like
in that
high
area.
end.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is going to be blasphemy, but I didn't like Knives Out.
Really?
Yeah, I thought it was, first of all, the Latina character. It's like, even though she wasn't a maid, it was like she's still subservient to this white family, and it's like that's always the narrative with a Latina. And then it was like Jamie Lee Curtis had basically a glorified cameo, and it was just played up like, oh, Jamie Lee Curtis is and it's just like she was in a couple scenes maybe, and all she was doing was smoking and making wisecracks. And I didn't.
But don't you think that was kind of the point of the whole film?
Just to have.
No, I mean having the Latino housemaid.
Because they were taking aim at like the Trump mindset of like looking down on immigrants, and like they were trying to turn that around. You're saying, or
I mean,
it was social commentary, basically.
I think it was all. Well, it wasn't all. I mean, it's a terrific murder mystery first and foremost. But the underlying themes.
That'll be for the next video. That'll be for the next video.
Yeah, exactly.
The underlying themes. I mean, it's a running joke in the film. That they say, you know, well, she's like part of the family.
Yeah.
Until it's time for her to actually get a piece of the pot.
Right.
And then it's
But it's like they had to turn her into a Mary Sue. Like she's so virtuous that she's boring. You know, it's like, oh, of course she couldn't have killed this man because she's this magical native woman. I just thought it was just the same tired stereotype, but like John said, that's a conversation for another time. But getting back to like, you know, some of the superhero movies like Fantastic Four, like how can you mess that up? And also the most recent X-Men movie, which I didn't see either.
It seems like they keep screwing up the Fantastic Four every time they try to make it.
Well, I actually like the ones that were the Jessica Alba ones. I thought they were just like, I mean, thought they were entertaining.
Yes, the first one's good. The second one's horrible. But the first one's not bad with Chris Evans and who else was in? I can't remember who played Mr. Fantastic.
Yeah, I don't remember.
I don't
It was a
remember Jessica
British
Alba.
actor.
I'm on the other side of where you guys are at, liking the Fantastic Four
Okay.
films, so they're completely
Yeah,
forgettable.
yeah.
I think that the problem with some superhero movies is there is not a simplicity. When I think of the some of the big disappointments in comic book movies, Green Lantern sticks out because they tried to fit everything in instead of just taking one small avenue and just going with that. Let's just talk at keep it an origin story. Don't pull in all the other Green Lantern Corps and then we have the conflict. No, just keep it simple. Keep it simple. Keep it as an origin story. Like an example, I felt Wonder Woman was fantastic.
Yeah, I did too.
I mean, the best movie DC's put out.
Okay.
Hands down, I feel. Because again, it was
Post-Nolan. Post-Christopher Nolan, right?
Well, yeah, and I'm taking the Batman movies out, kind of.
All right,
I'm gonna set those over to the side because I think that they have within the DC universe their own little universe for that.
Yeah.
Just making it clear for the viewer.
No.
Right. Yeah.
Hey, I would never trash Christopher Nolan. I'm a huge fan of Memento, so I'm never going to trash
Yeah.
him.
No, I'm just trying to keep it in line
Okay.
with where the Wonder Woman ranks in the scheme.
Okay, but I thought that it was a great film because it did that. It kept things simplistic. Same as we've talked about on the PVD cast. Shazam was another great.
Didn't see
Yeah,
that.
I really enjoyed it.
Again, streamlined. There's no twists and turns. It's point A, point B, point C, and you're done. And again, I felt that worked. That really made it fun, enjoyable, and it gave you a simple story that people could enjoy, whether they're a casual fan or if they're a hardcore comic book fan. I think the problem is exactly that. With many of these big budget superhero movies, you got so many chefs in the kitchen.
Yeah. The
And
studio.
and then you got DC or Marvel, whomever, going, no, you can't do that. Yes, you can do that. We prefer that you not do that. And I think that also ruins it too. So I think that they try to do too much. I think there's a lot of outside interference a lot of times, and that's what muddles everything.
Yeah, that's a good point. So when I put together my list of movies to watch this year, I thought it would be good to pick a couple of bad movies to learn what not to do.
What you think are going to be bad movies?
No, I would know infamous flops, infamously bad. That were not only they didn't make any money, but they were just torn to shreds by the critics, and audiences don't even like them. And so I don't know if you guys have ever seen there's a few YouTube channels that I really enjoy watching their reviews of bad movies. Half in the Bag is one. They have this notorious review of The Phantom Menace that's an hour long or more. Chris Stuckman's another one. He has this series called Halacrity where he goes and takes awful movies and just basically tears them apart. And then there's this other channel called Double Toasted where they just they just take bad movies and it's just entertaining watching them, picking them apart. And then I soon realized is that a lot of these channels, what they do is they take really obscure indie movies, movies that were obviously just thrown together by someone who either didn't know what they were doing, or they were made for $5 and released direct to DVD or whatever. And I thought there's nothing to learn from that, because it's when you're making an independent movie like that, you're making it under the worst circumstances. You're probably someone like me who's working a day job and doing filmmaking on the evening and weekends and trying to squeeze it in when you can. So it's the most stressful, high pressure conditions. So I realized it would be better to take a Hollywood mainstream movie that flopped and study how do you have all the best resources in the world, studio backing, big name stars. You're not working a day job, so it's not like you're trying to make this on your lunch hour or whatever.
Yeah.
So actually the movie I chose was Town and Country, an infamous flop from the early 2000s with Warren Beatty, Goldie Hawn, Diane Keaton, and Gary Shandling. It's about these rich people these rich New Yorkers that split their time between, their beautiful penthouses in New York and then their country homes, and it's all this infidelity, and it's like a soap opera basically. But it was one of the most infamously, it was delayed 13 times, and it was the budget was almost $100 million, and it made $6 million. So I mean, it's almost it's probably to the level of Ishtar, his other infamous flop. So I actually watched that, and it was there were a lot of things about it that some of the jokes were. It was basically like a kind of a romantic comedy, but it's like kind of weird because it's about infidelity. And I read a review that said American audiences don't find infidelity funny. But it's like, okay,
It depends. I mean, there are certainly films that
I have to pass on this one. I haven't seen. Have you seen it?
I saw it, but what year did you say it
it
came
came out in 2000. It was made in 98 or 99.
Okay,
It came out in 2001.
Okay.
Like right.
No, we would have been done in the show. I recall doing it. I don't recall not enjoying it, but I don't remember thinking it was horrible.
Yeah, that's what I saw. It's like even having
it was moderately bad. It was mediocre.
Yeah, even having read like really like scathing reviews, I watched it and I was like, well, this isn't horrible. I see where it's like gone off the rails, and because like some of it seems disjointed. Like the country seemed like they were filmed like, because I think they did some reshoots. So it was like there wasn't like enough continuity, because some of the scenes seemed like they were like filmed at a totally different. You could tell they were filmed at a totally different time.
Yeah.
But it's like, how do you have Warren Beatty, Diane Keaton, and Goldie Hawn, who all have Oscars, and then Gary Shandling, one of the most talented comedic actors ever, who has, I believe, at least one Emmy Award, and then you have almost $100 million budget. It's not like you have special effects. It's a character-driven movie about people living in the city, and how do you screw that up? And it just...
Why was it delayed 13 times? Like,
because of like screen testings, like the audience testings, like again the studio found like people don't like American, so a movie like, first of all, the movie is told from Warren Beatty's perspective, and it was like sort of making fun of his Playboy image. So he's this middle-aged man who ends up falling into bed with these various women. He's married to Diane Keaton. He has an affair with Natasha Kinski, like this sexy classical music violinist or cellist. And then he has an affair with Andy McDowell. And then Jenna Elfman flirts with him. I don't remember if they actually have an affair or not. And then Gary Shandling is like closeted gay, and he's married to Goldie Hawn. So there's a running joke of him, like he keeps trying to come out, and then every time he's about to say I'm gay, something happens and stops him.
Oh, jeez.
And it was like,
that gag just sounds like that's just tired, and it would get so old.
Oh, and it had Charlton Heston in it, and it was really weird because Charlton Heston played Andy McDowell's father, and so there's a really, really, really weird scene where Warren Beatty is in bed with Andy McDowell, and Charlton Heston comes in with a rifle. No, he doesn't have a rifle in that scene. He just comes in and gives Warren Beatty this lecture about, my daughter is a princess, and you better treat her like a princess, and then leaves the room. Okay, you just lectured this man who's in bed with your daughter, and then you just leave him in bed with her. And then he comes back later with a rifle, and that's supposed to make fun of Charlton Heston being this big gun rights advocate. And it's great that he had a sense of humor about it, but it just felt really flat, and it was.
Well, to your point, it's probably just a bad script. It's a bad screenplay.
Yeah, and Buck Henry, who's one of the most famous screenwriters ever, he wrote, I think it was called Heaven Can Wait or Heaven Can't Wait.
Yeah, the Warren Beatty film. Yeah, from '81, I think, that won a bunch of Oscars. Yeah.
So how do you have a really talented? It goes back to expertise. You have all these people with expertise and resources, and they manage to make a sucky, horrible movie.
Well, I mean, I think Michael Jordan misses a shot and two every once in a while, didn't he? I mean, maybe that's the case. I don't know. I can't speak for this film because I've never seen it.
Yeah.
But I mean, maybe it was just, as you said, a bad screenplay, and by the time they're 3/4 of the way or all the way done filming, they realize, oh man, this may not go well, and then they start doing the screen testing. But by that time, man, you're invested.
Yeah, you have so much money involved that
you got to try to recoup it somehow.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know. That's a very good question. So why they can't get that? Yeah.
And there were a lot of like loose ends. Like Goldie Hawn ends up having an affair with Warren Beatty, and Goldie Hawn is supposed to be Diane Keaton's best friend, but they never have any kind of resolution. They just drop it. Like Goldie Hawn never confesses to Diane Keaton, "Hey, I slept with your husband," and they just totally drop that plot line. I don't know if they couldn't get Goldie Hawn for the reshoots or something.
Now it's been however many years, 18 years or whatever, 19 years.
Almost 20,
since I've seen it.
Yeah.
So I can't really speak to it, but the nature of the plot sounds like something that Woody Allen would have done, and that Woody Allen would have succeeded with.
That's what
because
they were
a lot of his pictures involve infidelity, and it's done in a lighthearted and funny manner.
Right.
And there's a certain amount of subtext. Alan's trying to get across, and he delivers it well.
Yeah.
I'm not sure he could make that film now, considering what we know, behind
exactly.
off screen, the
Yeah.
problems that he's had and the rumors and the allegations. But back in that time period, or the 70s and the 80s, and even into the early 90s.
Yeah.
I mean, Alan was the pinnacle of making that type of film and succeeding in
Yeah.
it. And he was doing it. He was doing it with Diane Keaton, but he was
Yeah.
also doing it with a much smaller budget.
Yeah. And I mean, you could tell that's what they were trying to make. They were trying to make this witty, sophisticated comedy about New Yorkers and all this, their crazy, convoluted lives. And it just, like I said, I didn't think it was horrible. It's something that's like if it came on cable TV and I just happened to come across it, I'd watch it. But it's not something that I would have sought out, if I didn't have this mission of let me find a high-profile flop and examine why it was a flop.
So what did you learn from it? Because you said that was the objective for you,
Yeah.
was I'm going to sit and watch this, I'm going to learn something. So what lessons did you take from it?
Yeah, I think I think it was a bad script. I think Buck Henry, I mean, he's a good writer, but I think he just had a lot of outdated ideas. A movie like that, I feel like, is going to be the main audience for like a sophisticated comedy that doesn't have action or special effects. The main audience is going to be women. And here you have this totally unlikable character played by Warren Beatty. I feel like even though a lot of people don't like Nancy Meyers movies, I feel like if that had been done by Nancy Meyers, it would have maybe been a hit because she would have made it from like Diane Keaton's perspective. And Diane Keaton was just totally clueless throughout the movies. Like she has no idea her husband's cheating, let alone with her best friend. And it's just like, okay, you're basically making a movie for women, and then you're insulting the female characters and making one of the major characters, Goldie Hawn, completely unlikable because she's sleeping with her best friend's husband. And one of the reviews I read said this should have been like a European movie, and if it had been like a French farce or something, I could have seen it being a hit in France or something. But I don't think for an American mainstream audience, like you said, unless it was like something like a art house Woody Allen movie. Or if they had, like I said, made it like a Nancy Meyers, like Something's Got to Give kind of movie made from Diane Keaton's perspective.
Well, Roger Ebert once said, I believe he's the one that said this.
Yeah.
It's not what a movie is about,
yeah,
but how it's about it.
Yeah, okay. That's true.
That essentially any story can be turned into something that's interesting, engaging.
Exactly.
For
no matter
a particular
how,
audience, or maybe even a wide
no
audience.
matter how controversial this subject.
Yeah, then it's how is how is it tackled? How is it made? Not necessarily just the plot line itself.
Right. And again, this is something, being a person of color, I did not. First of all, they didn't have any characters. None of the major characters was a person of color. I'm not saying they had to have like one of the leads be a person of color, but like, so Warren Beatty's an architect in the movie. They could have had someone in his architectural firm be Black or Asian or Latino. Diane Keaton is an interior decorator. They could have had her partner in the firm be a Black woman or something. They could have, and then they have a stereotypical, again, Latina maid. Then they have another Latino character, and I'm not sure if he's like the caretaker or what he is, but he's speaking this broken English, and he's like, the butt of the joke. And then they have, so Warren Beatty and Diane Keaton have grown children, and the daughter is dating this guy who's portrayed as Arabic, but they later say he's Armenian. I guess you can be, Arabic if you're Armenian, but they have him speaking broken English, and I mean, it's just like, so every minority is in a really minor role, and the minor roles are really stereotypical. They have a scene where Diane Keaton and Warren Beatty are going to their vacation house in the Hamptons, and a bus full of Japanese tourists gets out and starts taking pictures. It's like, that's like the most stereotypical thing since Long Duck Dong and 16 Candles. And then they have a Black chauffeur. It's like, really? It's 2001, or I guess 98 when they made it, and you have a Black chauffeur and he's only in one scene. It's just like, I'm not saying that was the reason why the movie bombed, because obviously there's a lot of other movies with stereotypical minority characters, but that was just something that rubbed me the wrong way. So here I am, someone who's like willing to give it the benefit of the doubt, but because here's one more strike against it, because they made no attempt whatsoever at diversity. And even the Gary Shandling character, I mean, he wasn't overtly effeminate, but he, first of all, is an antiques dealer, so that's kind of stereotypical right there. And then they didn't have him have a love interest. It was like, okay, he's struggling all through the movie with coming out. He finally comes out, and then it's like a fake woke movie because it's like Goldie Hawn accepts him, his wife, everybody accepts him, and it's like, oh, I'm so glad you're being yourself. Okay, why not have him have a love interest? It's like you show him having like this tryst in a hotel room with another man, but you're not woke enough to let him have a love interest. So
I think that movie would have been better if it was told from Gary Shandling's character's point of view.
Maybe.
Because
you would have had a completely different movie.
Right,
yeah, it would have been like In and Out with Kevin Kline.
Yeah, but I think that would be more interesting because he could give you the perspective of, here's all the cheating going on and the internal struggle that he has.
He's removed from it because he's gay watching it from him.
Definitely. You know what? I've been sitting here trying to think of a movie similar to that, but I can't think of anything, that was a flop that I've ever watched to go, man, this was really bad and take something away from it. My friends and I, years ago, used to actually have bad movie night where we would just go to the video store and just let's see what they have. And some of the things that we would bring back, there were some surprises that you were like, oh, this looks like this is going to be awful. And I'll just throw one out as an example. John Boyega's first film, Attack the Block.
Oh, I think
that was pretty well received.
Was it? Okay, because
I just thought it was all right.
I liked it, but it looked bad. And we're like, this looks kind of bad, and then we plunked it in, and we're like, wow, this was actually good because again, it had a pretty interesting tale, and yes, it didn't have the best special effects. You didn't have to have that, I guess, for the story that they told.
What was the plot of the movie?
The plot of the movie is aliens are going to come and attack, literally, the block, which apparently is a housing project in England.
Okay.
I was unaware of that. And so these 4 or 5 young men who, don't come from the best upbringings, they're thieves and thugs and, whatnot, they defend that tower against the aliens. And again, it was pretty well done. It was a clever story. It was, like I said, the special effects were there, but they weren't spectacular. But I didn't think they had to. They used them very sparingly, I think, which helped out. And so I mean, some of those movies that we would just randomly pick turned out to be really, really good. Again, going back to this idea of you have the desire and you have a good story to tell, and it worked for whatever reason.
Cool. So to start to wrap this up, one last point I wanted to make was we cannot have a discussion about having expertise and resources and desire and circumstances for making a movie without talking about George Lucas, because the second trilogy, I'm sorry, and I think this is the consensus opinion among those of us who grew up with the original trilogy was The Phantom Menace, and the other ones just kind of sucked until
I didn't think episode 2 and 3 were terrible.
You didn't think the dialogue was horrible, like the
let's be honest. You go back and listen to some of Mark Hamill's dialogue from the original Star Wars. I mean, we're not talking Shakespeare here. There's a good instance of there's kind of this overarching grand tale that's being told in the first series.
Yeah.
With Star Wars: Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. And it's an experience. It's an experience like no one had ever seen before.
Right.
And that's why it was such a success.
Yeah.
And it, reached these overarching themes of good and evil and struggle. And, I even have a family struggle within the confines of the Star Wars saga. And then they're trying to essentially replicate it again with the first 3 episodes. I would say the first one fails in large part due to the fact that the central character, who's, the most imposing and I would say memorable character
Darth Vader,
of the entire series, all 9 episodes.
Yeah.
And he's what, 8 years old?
Yeah,
a 9-year-old kid, and you're trying. What's that?
He's like Davy Crockett.
Yeah, and you're trying to create this imposing force and menace, in an 8 and 9-year-old boy.
Yeah.
It doesn't cut it.
Yeah, and what was the actor who played him older? Hayden Christensen. I thought he was like the most wimpy Darth Vader ever. It's like he's not imposing. He
whined a lot.
Yeah, there was nothing that made you think, oh, he's going to become this awesomely badass, all black wearing villain. There was just nothing imposing or threatening about him to me at all.
I think you at least get into the taste of why he begins to become darker and brooding, and there's a little something behind it. you run out an 8 and 9-year-old. I think it's Jake Lloyd.
Yeah.
Who I
Yeah.
think's famed. I think he was also might have been in maybe Home Alone 3.
Okay. And poor thing, I know I saw a video where he said he got harassed at school, like people would
Really?
like whooshing sounds, like lightsaber sounds when he was walking by in the hallway, and he got bullied because of the Phantom Menace. And so did the guy who played Jar Jar Binks, which he deserved to be done. No, that was a horrible character, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and I mean, I think that, again, when you talk about the Star Wars franchise as well, I think that one of the things I think people should keep in mind too is I think that the first 3 movies that we enjoyed were spaced out better.
Mm-hmm.
You and I have talked about this. When you have if you're counting even the side projects, 6 Star Wars movies in 5 years, like how do we miss you if you never go away?
Yeah.
And
Are you talking about the more recent ones?
Yes, I'm talking about the more recent ones. Yeah.
See, I think the more recent ones compared to that second trilogy with the Phantom Menace
sure.
and the Clone Wars or whatever it's called, to me they're like far superior than that second. They're not as good to me as the original because nothing.
Right.
But I just thought the second trilogy was just such a disappointment. I mean, for those of us who grew up on the original trilogy and then waiting all those years, and then it's like this is what and just like the horrible digital.
Yeah.
Everything just looks so fake and overproduced and.
Yeah, and I think for these new ones, I think that's where maybe for me, I space them out, take more time with them, fine tune them a little bit better. I think that I think that would have made a much better project. I agree with you. I think that they are better than the Phantom Menace and the Clone Wars and that, like those, or Attack of the Clones, excuse me. I think they're better than that, but there's still some problems with them. I mean, the Force Awakens was pretty much a rehash of Star Wars, which is okay because I guess you have to build a new audience, but you have to incorporate us as well. Last Jedi was, I don't know, it was okay. I didn't mind crotchety Luke. I was the only one that did, I think.
I liked all 3 of them.
Yeah.
I liked all.
I know
the
you
most
did
recent
too.
ones.
Yeah.
I mean, do they live to the do they reach the level of say something like The Empire Strikes Back?
No.
but that's setting the bar fairly high.
True.
I think it's hard. Part of the reason the original Star Wars was so big is because it was like an experience no one had ever had. It was a cultural phenomenon. Empire Strikes Back, I think, was actually even an improvement upon the original.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah.
It took a darker turn.
Yes.
You still have these kind of rich characters involved in your storytelling too.
Mhm.
I think a lot of people I like Darth Vader. I think he's the most interesting character probably of, he's the most imposing force on screen.
Mhm.
So you have that going for you. You have Han Solo, a distinct character. You have Princess Leia, who is a very empowering female character.
Mhm.
And then you revert back to episodes 1, 2, and 3 to your point, and there's really there are no interesting characters.
Yeah.
I actually, and I know I'm in the distinct minority, I like Jar Jar Binks. He was
Okay.
the only one with a personality in the first film. I mean, what characters do you really have that give you any sense of color on screen in those first 3 films? There's Natalie Portman. They're all very stoic.
Yeah.
The Jedi. They can't have any. They're not livened up with any personality because they seem like they're almost pigeonholed into, Jedi or Sith or whatnot, and
Right.
they're so solemn and stoic, and they have to be stern in their beliefs that they can't have a personality.
So the underlying question is though, like, do you think George Lucas was just too insulated by, first of all, being too close to the material? Like he needed someone to like either co-write the script with him or.
I'm going to go the opposite way.
Okay.
He was too laissez-faire, too
Okay.
hands-off, I
Okay.
think. That was going to be my other point is I think that when you look at after the first 3 and you look at those other 6 films, I think he's probably, especially with these last couple, he probably had very little input because by now Disney owns it.
Yeah.
We're running with it.
Yeah.
And so, I think I'm going to go the opposite way, Chris. I think he had less and less and less to do with that franchise as it went on.
You're saying the
And I
second
think-
trilogy, he didn't have.
1, 2, and 3. Episodes 1, 2, and 3.
Well, I'm just saying. I don't know how much.
I think he directed.
Yeah,
each
that's
of
what I
these.
thought.
Did he
Yeah,
direct all
yeah,
3 of those?
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so if he directed all 3 of those, but I still think though that there's something there that for him wasn't clicking. You know?
That's obvious.
Yeah, I mean,
I think more to your point, I think he was so insulated with the world that he created.
Yeah.
He became so enamored with the world,
Yeah.
and kind of the, for lack of a better term, the nuts and the bolts
Yeah.
of how this was all working. We got a lot of scenes from what I remember of they were in the Senate. We got
Yes.
a lot of politics involved in this, and I'm looking at it and I'm like, I don't care a bit about
Right.
the dynamics,
The
of
intergalactic Senate.
Yes,
Yeah,
I mean, do I really care about the politics of the Senate? No. The reason why people loved the first few films is the struggle between good and evil, this
Very
overarching
simple, straightforward.
experience of it all, and and I still think at times I was wowed by some of the moments in the second and third episodes.
Mm-hmm.
You had this big scene where there had a lot of creatures involved. It was some kind of race. It was a lot of wide open space, and I thought he did a good job building the action and tension in those moments, and it had kind of this grand and epic feel. And I like the third episode probably to a certain extent because you had him essentially putting on the mask and becoming Vader himself, and you knew it was coming to that. But you never really had any other strong characters.
Yeah.
There were, and I think it is because he was enamored in kind of his universe,
Yeah.
more so than he was the characters themselves.
Yeah. And then maybe also it's kind of hard to keep that literal hunger when you're so multi-millionaire wealthy like that. I mean,
Yeah.
how do you,
Yeah.
I mean, that goes back to the desire. I mean, I'm sure he had the desire to want to tell more story, tell the origin story of all these characters that he had created, but it was like when you have, you're just living in the lap of luxury. I don't know if that's, more of a downside than not, because
I think it can be hard.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
to say if we're drawing parallels, for instance, to a sports analogy, the question can be, how can Mike Trout sign a contract for $350 million plus?
Yeah.
He still went out and had one of his best years.
Okay.
Steven Spielberg, I don't know if he's as rich as George Lucas, but he's right up there
yeah,
with him.
yeah,
and
he consistently does good work.
Yeah, so I think a large part depends upon the individual.
Right.
And what
Well,
what their focus and their desire and inevitable goal
True.
is, and how they're able to withdraw their passion from the projects they're involved in. Because Steven Spielberg isn't just making movies still for money.
Exactly.
And I would say this, that's the reason why we had the large gap between Jedi and Phantom Menace was that George Lucas claimed he wanted to spend time with family.
Mm-hmm.
So clearly, maybe that desire right there, those amount of years that we were waiting for a new Star Wars, that he was off doing what he wanted to do and what maybe he needed to do. I'm not underplaying that at all, but maybe that desire was tempered some.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we've had a really interesting discussion. A lot of, we have different perspectives on different things. So I think it's been a great discussion. Any final thoughts or?
No. Again, for me, I feel number one, most important desire. You gotta have it. You gotta have it.
Yeah. What about you, Paul?
I think desire is quintessential, but I think if you're making a good film, it's all four of the aspects that you alluded to in your introduction, in addition to a number of other things that go. I mean, to make a film, particularly a big one, with a large cast, and if you're a director and you don't necessarily write your script, you're trying to essentially put someone else's words into your vision.
Right.
So there's a lot of things that go into it. I don't know that we can sum it up in what probably amounts to an hour discussion.
Exactly. Yeah.
That there are a lot of ingredients that go into making
True.
a picture, and I guess that's what's so impressive about our finest filmmakers, that they're able, like a Spielberg or a Scorsese or more recently a Christopher Nolan, that they're able to continuously crank out films, different tales with different visions that continue to work.
Yeah, and I would agree with you, John, that desire is probably the most important ingredient. But I would say, just from my experience, that there's a happy medium between really sloppy filmmaking and just kind of slapping something together just to put it out there, just to say you made a movie, or try to do a cash grab by doing a cheap, low budget horror movie, thinking, oh, this is gonna be the next Blair Witch Project or whatever.
Yeah.
And the other end of the extreme is perfectionism. Like I mentioned, a lot of people out of film school think I cannot make a movie unless it's a mainstream multi-million-dollar production that's fully funded, or if I do an independent movie, it has to at least be $100,000. And so there's a happy medium somewhere in between. And I think there's no one way to make a good movie, because for some people going through the studio system, that is the best way to make a Star Wars or something like that. And then for other people, doing it micro budget like Edward Burns, it worked for him. But yeah. So where can people find you guys on social media?
Sure. Social media, I'm on Twitter. My own personal handle is @PVDMVP. You can find my podcast, if I can plug that real quick, over at my own website, pvdcast.com, or it's also available through all the major platforms: iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, Deezer, Google Play Music, all of them. Just search for it. And you can even check out the Facebook page of the PVDcast and just go to facebook.com/PVDcast.
I'm on Twitter @Paul_Markoff. And like I said previously, the podcast I co-host and co-produce with Mark Pfeiffer is called filmboundpod.com. You can find it anywhere where you find podcasts.
And then me, obviously, you can find me on YouTube under my name, Chris Bournea, Bournea, and then my website, chrisbournea.com. And then on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram is also my name, except Instagram and Facebook, I believe it's Chris Bournea Writer. So again, thank you guys, and hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Yeah, you got it.
Right. If you like this video, please like it and share it, and subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you soon.